Sundays in Bed with Kevin, and we're waiting for Nikki.
That's right.
Nikki is our guest star because she's going to speak about doing the workbook and her experience with the workbook.
Hi, everybody.
We might just get everyone to mute then, and Kevin, you take over.
Nikki, did you want to find a prayer to read that's helpful to you today, Nikki?
I'd just like to say hello to everybody. I know you all except for Kevin M. Hi, Kevin M. Prayer. I think I used my daily lesson. This day is God's. It is my gift to him. I will not lead my life alone today. I do not understand the world, and to try to lead my life alone must be but foolishness, for there is one who knows all that is best for me, and he is glad to make no choices for me but the ones that lead to God. This day I give to him, for I would not delay my coming home, and it is he who knows the way to God. And so we give today to you. We come with wholly open minds. We do not ask for anything that we may think we want. Give us what you would have received by us. You know all our desires and our needs, and you will give us all things that we want, and that will help us find the way to you. Okay, well, I would like to call this little talk my experience of the application of the daily lesson. And I'm going to talk to my experience, because that's all I know. I'd just like to say I've had no awakening experiences. My experience of the application of the daily lesson is like a slow erosion of all my upsetting thoughts. And it's put in one of the early lessons very nicely. I think it's lesson 9. Yes. Each little step will clear a little of the darkness away, and understanding will finally come to lighten every corner of the mind that has been cleared of the debris that darkens it. And that's my experience, a slow clearing of the debris. So I was asked to give this talk because I often refer to the daily lesson. And one of the most important sentences in ACIM, in my experience, is in the introduction to the workbook. And it's right at the beginning. A theoretical foundation such as the text provides is necessary as a background to make the exercises in this workbook meaningful, but it is doing the exercises that will make the goal of the course possible. That second sentence I found to be illustrated in the following way. I came to ACIM about 40 years ago. I picked up the text and read it, only the text. And my mind conveniently edited out the bit that says I'm supposed to be doing it with the Holy Spirit and I'm supposed to do the lessons. And it said, try and do this now. Which when I tried to do it now, I was an abject failure. And I felt so bad. I put it down, didn't touch it for 35 years. So that second sentence, yet it is doing the exercises that will make the goal of the course possible, has been completely illustrated by my own experience. So it still took me 6 months of doing the lessons before my mind would allow me to read the words that said, you're supposed to be applying this to your upsets. So when I got that, I thought, oh, bugger, I have to go back to the beginning, which I did. I came to Course in Miracles the second time around with an extremely painful mind. I'd smashed my car and therefore could not easily get to my psychologist. And I had the thought, I need a goal or I will fall back into the black hole of despair. My question was, what can I do? And the answer that came to my mind was, do A Course in Miracles. And I thought, oh, great. I don't need to leave the house to do that. Perfect. I'll get a copy from the library while I order one online, and I began right away. So this time I read the text and started the lessons. When I started, when I dubbed myself into this course yesterday, my mind started giving me all this stuff. So I've got sheets of paper scrawled with stuff on it, reminding me of how things went. I practiced alone with the Course in Miracles second time around for a year. I didn't know of any other spiritual teachings. I had no study groups, no books of any other kind than the Course in Miracles. I'll give you a little background on me. My father was agnostic and my mother was atheist. And their great strength was that they never tried to influence me. At the age of 6 or 7, I decided I was going to Sunday school. So I went, and what I remember from that is being taught with the image of a cup. The teacher held up a cup. It was clean on the outside, and then he showed us the inside, which was very dirty. And he said, this is what you are like. You're full of sin. This made me feel so bad that I left and never went back. I also resisted religious instruction in school and didn't have much to do with the church. So I'm largely ignorant of the Bible and the church, and I went my own way. That's just a bit of background. I'm going to read the introduction to the workbook because I fell in love with some of it. So we've done the first 2 sentences. The third one is also important. An untrained mind can accomplish nothing. It is the purpose of the workbook to train your mind to think along the lines the text sets forth. The exercises are very simple, and my mind went, oh, thank God for that. They do not require a great deal of time, and it does not matter where you do them. They need no preparation. Again, gratitude. The training period is 1 year. The exercises are numbered from 1 to 365. Do not undertake more than 1 lesson a day. Okay, very simple. Even someone in a state of mind like mine could take that in. Mind you, I I would recommend that you go back and read the introduction to the lessons several times, because it is amazing how much resistance the mind puts up to remembering any of these instructions. It's divided into 2 sections, first dealing with the undoing of the way you see now, second with the restoration of true sight. Each day's exercises are planned around one central idea, followed by a description of the specific procedures by which the idea for the day is to be applied. That was an important sentence, which I came back to later. The word specific procedures and the word applied. The purpose of the workbook is to train your mind in a systematic way to a different perception of everything in the world. The workbook is planned to help you generalize the lessons so that you will understand that each of them is equally applicable to everyone and everything you see. Well, I thought, well, that's very global. Okay. Transfer of training in true perception does not proceed as transfer of training of the world if true perception has been achieved in connection with any person, situation, or event. Total transfer to everyone and everything is certain. On the other hand, this is a very important sentence. One exception held apart from true perception makes its accomplishments anywhere impossible. Okay, so I can't make exceptions, not even to that person whose guts I hate. The only rules to be observed throughout then are, first, that the exercises be practiced with great specificity. Now that sentence came to have a lot of meaning to me later, so I'll emphasize it here. Great specificity, as will be indicated. In other words, the lesson will tell you what to do. This will help you to generalize the ideas involved to every situation in which you find yourself and to everyone and everything in it. Second, be sure that you do not decide for yourself that there are some people, situations, or things to which the ideas are inapplicable. That's reinforcing that you can't make exceptions. This will interfere with transfer of training. The very nature of true perception is that it has no limits. It is the opposite of the way you see now. So I didn't want to interfere with transfer of training. The overall aim of the exercises is to increase your ability to extend the ideas you will be practicing to include, oh bugger, I'm reading the wrong version. Okay, so I copied in the Circle of Atonement edition's version of these exercises because there are some sentences left out of the FIP combined edition, which is the one I'm got here. So here's some of the bits that are left out. Many of the earlier exercises should be practiced with eyes open to emphasize that the aim is to learn how to see. Also, unless you're instructed otherwise, it's recommended that each exercise be repeated several or even many times a day, preferably in a different place each time, and if possible, in every situation in which you spend any long period of time. Yeah, so those sentences don't appear to be in the FIP edition. The purpose, blah-de-blah-de-blah, we've done that, great specificity. Here's the sentence, another sentence I fell in love with. The aim of the exercises will always be to increase the application of the idea to everything. This will require no effort on your part. And I thought, great. The exercises themselves meet the conditions necessary for this kind of transfer. Once again, reminded, only be sure you make no exceptions. Paragraph 7 in the Circle of Atonement edition of these instructions to the workbook. Some of the ideas you will find difficult to believe, and others will seem quite startling. It does not matter. And I thought, well, that's a relief. I don't have to believe. You are merely asked to apply them as you are directed to do. Okay, so this is like a workbook for idiots or an instruction manual for dummies. Perfect. I fit that category completely. You are not asked to judge them or even to believe them. Oh, thank God, I don't have to believe this stuff. When I first opened the Course in Miracles, and I read the bit that it said, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. I thought, I don't know how this could possibly be true, but oh, I love it. I'm going to do it anyway. So, okay, so I started out not believing how this could possibly be true, but willing to be shown. So I'm really relieved to discover that belief is not necessary. Wonderful. You're not asked to judge them or even to believe them. You're merely asked to use them. It is their use that will give them meaning to you and show you they are true. So I was into the using them, but with the little postscript that it took me 6 months to recognize that I was being told to apply them. Some of them you may actively resist. I call that active resistance, like the mind is just blocking that out, like it did 40 years ago. It's blocking out the bit that says you're supposed to be doing this with the Holy Spirit. Okay, so that's one example of active resistance. None of this will matter or decrease their efficacy, but allow yourself to make no exceptions. Once again, he's telling us that in applying the ideas the exercises contain. Whatever your reactions to the ideas may be, use them. Nothing more than this is required. And I thought, oh, God, thank you. Nothing more than this is required. So 6 months into the course, I'm suddenly reading the words that tell me to apply this lesson to my upsetting thoughts. And I'm thinking, what? How long has this been going on? So I went back to the beginning at one time and I looked for the answer to that question. The answer to that question is in lesson 4. And I thought, you mean I've managed to miss that for 6 bloody months? Okay. So how does it pop up in lesson 4? It says in paragraph 5 in the FIP edition, you can also use the idea for a particular thought that you recognize as harmful. So that's very brief. That's all it says. But in lesson 5, it really expands on this. I am never upset for the reason I think. This idea, like the preceding one, can be used with any person, situation, or event you think is causing you pain. Apply it specifically. There's that word specifically again. To whatever you believe is the cause of your upset, using the description of the feeling in whatever term seems accurate to you. The upset may seem to be fear, worry, depression, anxiety, anger, hatred, jealousy, or any number of forms, all of which will be perceived as different. This is not true. However, until you learn that form does not matter, each form becomes a proper subject for the exercises for the day. So this lesson is hugely important for learning the application of the idea to your upsetting thoughts. Applying the same idea to each of them separately is the first step in ultimately recognizing they are all the same. And this is my practice. My mind's been trained through the lessons to notice the upsetting thoughts, and I apply the daily idea specifically to each thought I notice. So it's a practice that must be done in the now. when the thought is attacking the mind and the feeling says, I feel crap, okay, that's a thought that I don't want. I'm going to apply the daily idea to it. At this point, I'm going to go back to my own experience. When I came to the course, I was suffering from a horrible sense of loss, so painful that I ended up thinking of ways to kill myself every day. In the 4th year of my visits to the psychologist, I smashed my car. And I thought, what am I going to do? So that's how I got back to the course. And the first thing I started working on was what was attacking my mind every day. And it was the thought of loss. And every time I got triggered, I would apply the daily lesson to it. Now, in the beginning, my practice was very wobbly. So I would have lots of times where I'd be having these painful thoughts and not notice I was, and not realize I should be applying the daily lesson to them. And then I would get a heightened level of upset. And when I applied the daily lesson to it, it seemed not to work. The ego said, this is not working. So then I started to dive into a depression, despair again. And then I had the thought, but you missed the other 5 thoughts that came after it. So I thought, oh, you just keep applying it. Sometimes the thoughts come like a volley on a tennis court, one after the other after the other. So I did that, and I began to get success again. And the success I'm talking about is that I would be relieved of the upset. When did I start noticing this? I noticed it because I was in the kitchen making breakfast, and I thought, oh, what just happened? Oh, I'm not thinking about those upsetting thoughts anymore. How about that? I just stopped thinking about it and gone on my way. Something else came into the mind. So, and that's my consistent experience. The upsets disappear. And I move on. I'm thinking of something else. So as time went on, I began to think about this and I said, what's going on? Oh, is it like I'm giving permission to the Holy Spirit to take away a thought I don't want? By that, I mean that I'm taking responsibility for a thought system that I made up. I don't have any idea that I did this. I don't remember this, but Jesus is telling me that's what I did. Okay, so if I take responsibility for it and offer it to the Holy Spirit, this is what the application of the daily lesson is. I'm doing what's asked of me, and I'm being relieved. I'm getting released. Okay, great. So I continue doing it. So my experience of this crushing sense of loss is like, it's like a mountain under which I am squashed, and all I want to do is die, and I'm being offered daily thoughts of ways to kill yourself. So this mountain, with the application of the daily lesson to every single one of these thoughts of loss that got triggered, was like it, over 6 years, it gradually reduced to what I call a molehill that pops up from time to time. And then I apply the daily lesson because it's a well-recognized feeling, loss. 6 years of experience, that feeling, that shitty feeling of loss. It just, each molehill pops up and then disappears. So from Mount Everest to molehills, great stuff. Loved it. So that's my experience. When I first started doing groups a year into the course, I couldn't understand why other people were not having the same experiences, or not even talking about them, might be more accurate to say. And then as time went on, I realized how very different everybody's progress with the course was, and how very different the ways they worked with the course. So I kind of abandoned all these judgmental thoughts that were coming on, like, hang on, that was a fear thought. You just said a fear thought. Why are you believing that? Just apply the daily lesson. This brings me to the next thought that came in. I really got the lesson that said my thoughts don't mean anything. And I thought, well, if my thoughts don't mean anything, it means I don't have to spend any time thinking about them. I only have to recognize them by their emotional tags, like lost thoughts and fear thoughts and worry thoughts and future worries and grievances and jealousy, and they all feel yucky. They all feel crap. This is the great assistance that the ego gives us. It basically says, I'm an ego thought because you feel like shit. So it identifies them for us. And the course trains us to recognize them. It says, look at these thoughts. Here you go, I'll list them for you. Fear, worry, depression, anxiety, anger, hatred, jealousy. They're all the same, says Jesus. Okay, they're all the same. I'll apply the daily lesson to each one I recognize that I'm in. Then further on, it talks about thoughts of conflict, when the mind is in conflict, something ego loves to do. Oh, great, that's a conflict thought. Right, I can stop thinking about that. I'll apply the daily lesson to it. And those two thoughts, lesson 5, the first and biggest training about how to apply the daily lesson to your upsetting thoughts. And the other lesson, my thoughts don't mean anything, which I think is the one before it. Yeah. Lesson 4, these thoughts do not mean anything, which is repeated a number of times. Those two put together in my mind became the basis of my daily practice. And it's always been since then. So 6 years of that practice of watching my thoughts, and the transfer of training does proceed without my effort. This thought of failure that I experienced 4 years ago when I took up the course. You're a terrible course student. You're failing at this. You're doomed. This thought has come up for 6 years, and it's got into the Monday night study group of the new edition, the Course of the Circle of Atonement edition, and it's been attacking for 2.5 years. So some thoughts it takes you a bloody long time to actually recognize that they're happening. You might recognize them for a while, then forget it and believe them, and then recognize them a bit more later, then forget it, then believe them, and until one day you get to the point where you go, hang on, I've been through all this. This is crap. This is bullshit. This is ego lies. All right, so you just get better and better at recognizing some of these, what I call hard cases that go on for a long time. And this brings me to the step that's very, very important. That's the recognition of the thoughts that have been running you. That's the first step. If you can't recognize them, you can't apply the daily lesson to them. And so the training that transfers without any effort on my part is just wonderful. I love it. And it works. It does happen. It might take 6 years, but it does happen. I'll go back to some of my scribbled notes. Oh yes, I've talked about lost thoughts, and one day I woke up. Oh yeah, I'll talk to you about one of the lessons that talks about more generalized feelings. And one of them they mentioned was depression. So this is like a thought that arises for no reason, or a feeling, shall I say, that arises for no reason at all. It's not attached to anything. So I wake up in the morning, I open the curtains and I think, hang on, I feel grey. I'm under a grey cloud. What's going on? Oh, this is depression. Oh, this is one of those generalized emotions that the early lesson talks about. Oh, I don't have to put up with this. Okay, I'll apply the daily lesson to it. I did, and the next thing I know, I'm making breakfast. I thought, bloody-tastic. I don't ever have to put up with depression again. Or should I say, a generalized depression. Okay, pain, my experience with pain. So during the David Paul Doyle course, I learnt pain is a sensation. A sensation is a thought. Oh, I can apply the daily lesson to that. So my experience with shingles was this. I had that idea come into my mind. Right, I'll go and lay down and I'll apply the daily lesson to this shingles pain, which was getting bad. It was overtaking. Hence, I went and laid down. And I did that, and my experience was that I found myself getting up and going on with whatever I was doing. So in other words, that really intrusive pain that overtakes everything had gone away, and it had gone down to a background level of discomfort that didn't stop me doing or thinking. Another experience with the application of the daily lesson to pain was when I was driving back prior to my hip replacement. I had been on a very long drive and I was driving back, and it was getting very uncomfortable and I was getting distressed. So I pulled into a service station, had a break and thought about it. And I applied the daily lesson to this upset, this distress. And what I recognized was that the pain was being amplified by fear. And the fear thoughts were, this is going to get worse and worse. I'll never get home. I don't know how I'm going to get home. And so I applied the daily lesson to all these fear thoughts. And what happened was I became calm again. I took off. The pain didn't get worse. I got home and I realized after I was unpacked that I'd done all that without even thinking about the hip pain. So there's pain, and then there's all the fear thoughts that surround it, which turn it into major distress, and they were complete rubbish. Nothing like that actually happened. It was bullshit. I just needed to pull over and have a rest for a bit and apply the daily lesson to all the fear thoughts. The third experience with pain was in the actual hip replacement, the operation on the day. I had not looked at anything to do with hip replacements before I went in on the day. And the first thing I discovered was they hadn't got my hospital admission statement. So the night before I thought, wow, this is going to be a big day. I need an easy lesson to apply. What's my lesson tomorrow? There is nothing to fear. I just keep saying that. Oh, I thought, oh, that's perfect. So I went in and I was attacked for the first time by a continuous stream of fear thoughts. And to each one I applied the daily lesson, there is nothing to fear. And I felt my body relax again. So my experience throughout the whole morning before I was put under was tension with the fear thought, relaxation with the application. And it went like that, tension, relaxation, because the fear thoughts were coming like one of those long country trains that have got a million cars attached to them. So it went on like that until I was put under. And when I woke up, it started again. And I just continued on each fear thought that came up. And it took me through the problem in the recovery room. They said, the first thing they said to me when they saw me wake up was they were right there, and they said, tell us if you're in any pain. So I just said pain, 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 pain. And by the time I'd said it the fourth time, they got it under control and it was gone. Then I had a problem. I was in distress and I couldn't communicate all that well. And they were sitting right next to me saying, what's the problem? And I said, neck. And they said, is it this, is it that? And I said, too high. So they took the pillow away and put a folded towel under me, and then I relaxed completely. So that was all taken care of without me having to think about that at all. And then I was taken down to the room and they had to take me back because they said your temperature's too low. And all the time the fear thoughts are coming a bit in about every tiny little thing that happened. And my experience again is tension, relaxation, tension, relaxation, as each fear thought was disappeared. I ended up sharing a room for one night with a woman who had this peculiar habit of expressing gratitude to an excessive extent. So I'm thinking thoughts about, oh my God, can I stand this? And then I thought, this is a fear thought, tension, relaxation, as I applied a daily lesson to this. And the next day I had a room to myself. And from that moment on, I had the best fun in hospital. It was wonderful. I had a fantastic room with a glorious ceiling to floor, wall to wall window where I could see everything. I got great food. I was so looked after. Nothing hurt. I just had a fantastic time. And then after 4 days there, they moved me to rehab and I loved it. I just had the best time in rehab. The exercise room and all the care they give you is terrific. And when it came to that, I recognized all these thoughts coming up about, oh, they can't move my leg like that. That's going to hurt. Ooh, relaxation with the application of the daily lesson. I went along with everything he said, and he was proved to be right. No, it didn't hurt. And if it was uncomfortable, it didn't get any more than that. It just went so great. I just can't tell you how great rehab was. I loved it. So then I went home and that didn't work, of course, because I couldn't look after myself. My friends took me down to my mum, and my Auntie Yvonne happened to be staying. My Auntie Yvonne loves to cook. Mum hates to cook. The two of them looked after me. It was just, fantastic. So, the application of the daily lesson all the time. All the interactions between my mum and my auntie, which were conflictual, you could say. I just applied the daily lesson to tension and relaxation. That's pain. Lies the ego has told me about the application of the daily lesson. This doesn't work. It's not working. So I came to a point one day where I was extremely upset. And I found the application of the daily lesson wasn't working. And I got upset about it. And then I had a talk with someone and they said, sometimes you need to vent. And that is what I did. And the value of that is that the upset that's overwhelming the mind is like a boiling kettle or a pot. And if you lift the lid, it releases the pressure enough for your mind to calm down enough to apply the daily lesson. So there was value in that. I don't use it very much, but if it's not working, then I'll have a go at that one. I generally do my venting and my lesson in private places. I do my daily lesson. On the toilet is a big favourite. If I've been triggered in company, I'll go to the toilet. Nobody's going to stop you going to the toilet. So I go to the toilet. If I have emotion in the toilet, as I usually do have emotion when I apply the daily lesson, nobody hears, nobody sees, and nobody knows anything's happened. So you can come back into the room. Nobody even knows that I was upset because I've left the room. I don't express it. just go and apply the daily lesson to it so that when I come back, I'm in peace. I no longer feel bloody irritated with the people. I'm okay again. AIDS. The ego will tell you, oh, you don't need AIDS. The daily lesson, the mind will interfere and wipe it out. Or should I say the ego will interfere and wipe it out. So what do I mean by AIDS? First of all, it started out with writing the application of the daily lesson on a card. I started out with bits of paper, but they were less easy to handle. I used to put it in my back pocket so I'd have it with me everywhere. This is before I got a smartphone. For the first 4 years, I didn't have a smartphone. Then I learned that there are lesson cards you can get. So I got the lesson cards from the foundation online, and they were great because I didn't have to write it out. And so I could just slip it in my pocket and go about my day. And every time I get upset, the mind would like kind of lock down. What's the bloody lesson? Okay, whip out the card and read it and apply the daily lesson as it instructs. So that's what I call AIDS. Then my sight changed a bit, and the print on the lesson cards is very, very tiny. So with the smartphone, the advantage is that I can have it in a dark room and it gives me light to read it. Where was I? Yeah, okay. Aids are necessary. Use them. If they, oh, hello, Alice. How long have you been there? I didn't notice you. Sorry. Welcome to this talk. It's being recorded, so everything you've missed, you can catch up with. Yeah, aids are important. They really help. If you want to apply the daily lessons with great specificity, as Jesus tells you to, and if you want to be released from these painful thoughts, you need aids to help you. Remember, you can. Some people write it on their arm. I think I did that once, and I didn't like the publicity of it, so I just have the card stuck in my back pocket and I whip it out, and people wouldn't really. Could have been a shopping list. They didn't know, so that felt more comfortable to me. With the smartphone, the last 2 years, the print's bigger. I got used to carrying the thing around with me, and it's great if I've gone to bed and I'm still awake and the hourly remembrances come up. So going back to lies the ego has told me, it manages to forget the instructions. So I've gone back to the instructions at the beginning of the workbook several times and gleaned a new bit from it each time. This active resistance that it talks about, I've noticed. So the third time through the workbook, I'm reading things, it's just tiny things are dropping in, and distractions. Oh my God, a lesson would take me over an hour to get through. And I'm thinking, for fuck's sake, there must be an easier way. So the thought came into my mind, apply the daily lesson to all these distracting thoughts. So I did that, and that worked quite well. So the getting through the lessons became easier. This is just one of the ways that the mind actively resists, or the ego actively resists doing of the lessons. One of the things I thought about these multiple attacks, like a tennis volley of upsetting thoughts when you're really triggered, is when it gets to about the 6th volley, it kind of gives up because it's dawned upon the ego that you're undoing it. It thinks, oh, I better shut up here. This is like a little image I've got of what the ego is doing in my mind. So some of the things I started off with, this terrible sense of loss, this sense of safety and security, gone, lost. And someone to make all my social situations easier, gone, lost. Horrible feeling. That has gone from waking up screaming in the night, having had a dream about someone I'd literally lost on the streets of Melbourne and couldn't find, to enjoying the absence of my housemates and having the house to myself for 7 weeks. and not suffering at all. Yes, this sense of loss was the loss of a relationship. When I gave this relationship away, I had no idea what I'd done. I had no idea I had invested all my sense of safety and security in it, all my sense of companionship. And this role the other person was playing that I didn't recognize was making all my social situations easier. But number one was this sense of safety and security that went. I found that this idea that I would be better off, you know, the egos, you'll be better off if you get rid of this person, was total bollocks. And then I realized that I had, in the 15 years with this person, I had totally forgotten that I was absolutely crap at being single. I had totally forgotten it. So all these flights of fancy about traveling and being and having a really interesting life came down to, I can't get out of the house. I am too afraid to leave the house. That's the truth of that personality. It was all those flights of fancy that said, you'll be better off without that one, were complete crap. So all this that was invested in that person fell to nothing. And I was left with, I can't get out of the house. I'm terrified of leaving the house. So now, 6 years on, I recognize that my sense of safety and security is not dependent on another human being. My sense of social easiness is not dependent on another human being. And I became aware of the extent of this. What they call it, social anxiety, I will call it social uneasiness, but uneasiness to the extent that I would get ready for the party, all the while I'm thinking, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, and then try and find ways of getting out of it. I hated parties, still don't like them much. So I'd managed to forget all this to the extent that when I went next door to talk to my neighbour, I couldn't figure out why I was so uncomfortable with her. And she's a lovely lady. So a few years down the track, while I'm a singleton, learning how to be a singleton with A Course in Miracles, I'd been with a bunch of Course in Miracles students at an end of year get-together, picnic. I got in the car, someone gave me a lift, and I thought, why am I so uncomfortable? And the driver popped into the CD drive an Eckhart Tolle CD, and he started talking about this very thing, and I recognized what was going on. At the beginning of the FIP edition, it talks about, just before what it says in the preface, on page 12 of the preface, the little I seeks to enhance itself by external approval. And I thought, oh my God, that's what's been going on that entire picnic. I've been having all these comparison thoughts, and all of them put me down and them up. I thought, oh, this is the ego doing the comparison thing. So that was the day I learnt about comparison thoughts of the ego, all of which later on I learned, all of which are designed to cement the idea that you are a little personality, the little idea. They're better than me. They do this better than me. I'm not so good at that. Gee, I wish I was like them. Envy, jealousy. Ah, dear, they'll think I'm blah, blah, blah. Oh, God, never ending. So I became aware of them, and this is the recognition stage. And I was so grateful to that friend who popped the CD into the car as we were driving along, and I was listening to Eckhart Tolle describing this process of the ego, and I thought, fantastic. Now I can see what's going on. So I started applying the daily lesson to that, and my social uneasiness, the extent of which I was never really in touch with, became more and more apparent to me as it disappeared. So it's like, now you see it, now you see it going. It was lovely. So my ability to be at ease in company has greatly improved. So these are things, the successes I've had. Loss, don't really believe in it anymore. Depression, don't really think I have to put up with that anymore. social anxiety. I have a much better time around people these days. And then we come to grievances. Yes, that is the core, the difficult core. This whole business about projection, at one point with one of my primary grievances, which is big, I won't tell you who, in case this gets very public. I recognized that I was afraid of seeing my projection. This did not stop me having relief from all the irritations that were happening, because I found that I could apply the daily lesson to the irritation without even knowing what I was irritated about. I would still get reliefs. I could come back into the room and be at peace with that person until the next time I was triggered. This went on for years, and I had the thought at one point, what is going on? And the difficulty of seeing what the words were that I was reacting to was huge. So this is another one of those examples of active resistance. It's still going on. So this is one of my big forgiveness lessons. I don't accept that I need to be irritated with this person. I don't accept that this is something real. I don't accept what the ego's telling me, but I'm still too afraid to find out what it is. I'm afraid to see this in me. Okay, that's all right. That can go on until I'm no longer afraid. I can apply the daily lesson to this fear, but it has not actually shifted a huge amount. But I have noticed that what has happened is little fragments come in. So I get just a little fragment of an idea, and it's gone so fast, I forget it. But I know that I've seen something, but it's been so fast that I can't, there's no traction for the ego to forget it. I mean, oh, well, there you go. It's just the ego forgets it. But I know that something shifted. So it still works, even though fear of seeing what's going on is huge. And I'm really, really, really grateful for that, because my experience of my relationship, being that I could never tolerate more than 3 days in that person's company, now I'm able to be in their company for months. Literally, I was with that person for months. At the time, I thought, this is fantastic. I love it. And so what my experience is that one of the reasons I fell into the black hole of despair was that not only did I lose that primary couple relationship, or I threw it away actually, but I discovered that all my familial relationships were horrible. They were terrible. That has transformed over 6 years to the extent where I really enjoy them a hell of a lot more than I used to. And some of them I actually love. It's not all undone, of course. I'm still getting triggered. That's fine, because I still get the peace, which is wonderful. Yeah, so that's my successes with the application of the daily lesson. Safety and security. Yeah, safety possibly is another one of my very long-standing lessons. But I guess, you know, once you're no longer worried for your safety, you're pretty close to one of those awakening experiences. So I do have fear of death, and I notice it a lot when I'm a passenger in a car or a driver in a car. I notice it on the road a lot. So I apply the daily lesson to that. But I'm able to be home alone and content, which isn't totally new in my life. Another one of the ego lies that I've heard is you shouldn't need to keep applying the daily lesson. You shouldn't have to keep doing this. Total bollocks. Don't believe that. So now I've found that in some social situations, I'm laughing and having a good time. Huh. I used to be in such a state of tension that I'd be practically frozen. Here's another one. Sofa and TV guilt. One day I found myself at the fridge with the door open, and I said to myself, what just happened? And the answer came to me, guilt. You've been lying on the sofa watching TV for 2 hours in a state of constant guilt. And I thought, fantastic, I've just had a recognition. That's been going on for so long. Now I can apply the daily lesson to sofa and TV guilt. Brilliant. Sofa and TV guilt leads to the fridge and the pantry for me. One of the places I've applied the daily lesson to is in the car. Just pull over and apply it. About anger. In the course it says, beneath a tiny tick of irritation is a murderous rage. And I thought one day, I mean, I'm very familiar with the experience of irritation. So I went to my room and this thought came in. I said, well, let's see how that goes. So I just let myself go into that. Very gently let myself go into that, and within a matter of seconds I had an image of myself on top of the person with a baseball bat pounding them into a pulp, and I thought, oh yeah, there's the murderous rage. That's true. All righty. I don't think I want to do that again. I'll just stick with a little bits of irritation. Here's a lesson that I absolutely love, lesson 26, the application of the daily lesson 26. I had a very, very difficult meeting. I was terrified of doing it. So I recognized fear, and I'd already had a little experience with lesson 26, and I'd taken to writing it down. What I love about lesson 26 when I've got the pen in my hand is that the fear thought comes up, I write it down, I do the application, which is that thought is an attack upon myself. And then I'd find that another thought, fear thought, would arise. And this went on for 6 pages. I had no idea that this paralysis and terror of this meeting was hiding this great big ball of interlocking fears. And lesson 26 allows each one in a quite leisurely way to be undone. And holding the pen and writing it out contributes to the leisurely nature of it, and allows you to see them disappearing, and allows you to recognize the next one that comes up. So I just loved lesson 26. And as I'm going along, I noticed I'd got a good idea. So I write that down as well. And the good ideas kept coming back to the point where I thought, I'm going to act on it now because I just want to get over the hump of this fear and do this meeting. So I did act on it, and I was given the words to say to open up the meeting, and it all went great. It really was a memorable occasion of the application of lesson 26 to a big old gnarly fear that I had no idea the extent of. It wasn't just one, it was 6 pages of them. So fabulous. The I just want to be right story. I've learned to recognize that feeling of I want to be right about this. So here's the story. I'm in a car with 2 other people, and we're talking about an incident, and we're arguing about what happened, who said what, and when it happened. And I suddenly felt this feeling, I want to be right about this. So here I am in the driver's seat, sitting at the intersection, and I said loudly, I don't care what the facts are. I just want to be right. And everybody cracked up. It was hilarious. So that's that feeling. Yep. Get through the stuff. It's good. Yeah, the future fears, what Lana beautifully described, Lana Carolan, who was one of our previous guest speakers, beautifully described as being in Tomorrowland. I began to recognize future fears with that lovely lesson. I placed the future in the hands of God, and I experienced all the relief of that, and I was returned to the present. I mentioned conflict thoughts. When I began to recognize the feeling of internal conflict, that fabulous lesson, there is no will but God's, the application to recognition that I'm in a conflict thought is, there is no will but God's, these conflict thoughts are meaningless. And then I would find myself relaxed and my mind released. Lovely stuff. And I think I've come pretty much, one more page. Oh yes, the urge to blame. Getting back to the grievance thoughts. I began to recognize the urge to blame, the desire to blame, and I began to recognize the urge to justify this blame. And the urge to join with others and get them to agree with me. I began to recognize this stuff. And these are the kinds of things that will attack after, like in that tennis volley of thoughts. You'll get all these temptations to blame and reinforce the grievance instead of saying, I'm in a grievance, I need help, I'll ask for the correction. So those kind of temptations I began to recognize as well. Lesson 9. I love lesson 9. Some important things in lesson 9 that I want to emphasize. This emphasizes what's said in the introduction. I see nothing as it is now. This idea obviously follows from the two preceding ones, but while you may be able to accept it intellectually, it is unlikely that it will really mean anything to you as yet. However, understanding is not necessary at this point. That is a sentence where I went, thank you, God, because I don't understand. I'm just doing this by rote. I'm just doing what you tell me to do. Thank God I don't have to understand. In fact, the recognition that you do not understand is a prerequisite for undoing your false ideas. These exercises are concerned with practice. That is a really important sentence to me. Practice, practice, practice. Every single day since the day I picked up the book again. These exercises are concerned with practice, not with understanding. You do not need to practice what you really understand. It would indeed be circular to aim at understanding and assume that you have it already. It is difficult for the untrained mind to believe that what seems to be pictured before it is not there. This idea can be quite disturbing and may meet with active resistance in any number of forms. Yet that does not preclude applying it. So you can be resisting 6 ways from Sunday. You could be failing to understand, failing to believe. None of that matters. What you have to do is apply it. No more than that is required for these or any other exercises. Wonderful. That repeats what the introduction says. No more than that. This course is so easy. Even an idiot like me can do this. Each little step will clear a little of the darkness away, and understanding will finally come to lighten every corner of the mind that has been cleared of the debris that darkens it. This sentence was very important for me to hear, because the ego kept telling me, this course keeps saying that you can do this now. And that's not my experience. I feel like I'm failing. The ego's telling me I'm failing. I feel like a terrible failure. And then I read this sentence and I say, oh, it's telling me that each little step will clear a little of the darkness away and understanding will finally come. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God, I'm not failing. Right, I think I might have run out of things to say.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Does anyone have any questions or comments or want to share their own experience with the daily lessons? Just unmute yourself if you want to. Otherwise, we can do a 10-minute meditation if no one wants to say anything.
I want to say something. It's interesting that I know a ton of people, and when they did the workbook, they never bothered to read the introduction. And they did it like it was a meditation. They did it once or twice a day, and they would sit there and they do it for X amount of time. And there was no thought in their mind that it was like for an application. It really amazes me how many people I know who I had to say, well, have you read the introduction? They'd say, no. Like, why should I read the introduction? Why don't I just do the lessons? It's just really interesting because the introduction does say a lot of stuff that is very important, especially about applying it throughout the day, doing it throughout the day, any place you find yourself, and applying it to, you know, when you get upset and doing it with your eyes open. That's a big one. Most people sit there and say, I'm not upset for the reason I think. My thoughts don't mean anything. And they'll sit there and they try to meditate on the lessons. And it really blows me away how the introduction to the workbook really does offer something that isn't in, let's say, the rest of the book. It really is the way that it all ties together and it comes to work for you. There's a friend of ours, she said, well, I'm going to do the workbook again. She would call me and say, you know, I still get upset. I said, well, don't you apply the ideas? She said, no, I do it in the morning and I do it in the evening. And I wonder, like, well, what's the point? And it's really interesting. It just blows me away.
I think the point is that the resistance to doing this is enormous. I mean, I had to go back and read the introduction many times, and my mind stopped me from understanding I'm supposed to be doing the course with the Holy Spirit. In the very beginning, it read that and then it instantly forgot it. 35 years later, it took a crisis in my life to bring me back to the course. And even then, when I did the lessons, I had to go back to the introduction several times to absorb it because the mind will not want you to read it. And I'm talking about the ego mind. It will fight you in, that's the active resistance he talks about. It doesn't want you to read this stuff. I mean, it took me 6 months of doing the lessons before the thought came in, oh, that sentence there told me to apply the daily lesson to my upset. Oh, I haven't been doing that. In fact, I don't remember reading that. I had read it. I'd read it for the 6 months, but my mind had forgotten it. So I went back to the beginning and how long has this been going on? It's been going on since lesson 4. Like, here's a couple of examples. The idea for today can, of course, be applied to anything that disturbs you during the day, aside from the practice periods. And here's another one. This is just in the first 20 lessons. Today's thought can obviously serve for any thought that distresses you at any time. You may find it helpful, however, to include your irritation or any emotion that the idea for today may induce. So that's warning you that the very idea for the day may induce irritations or an emotion. You can apply the daily idea to your irritation with the daily idea. Today's idea is useful for application to anything that seems to upset you. The mind manages to block all this stuff out. I mean, I've experienced reading something, thinking, great, and then instantly forgetting it. It's just amazing how much resistance there is. I think that's the answer to what you were saying, Teddy. This is the ego at work.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I get it. You know, we're in the forgetting and we forget. Never underestimate the power of denial. But I mean, we forget how much resistance in the mind, how much fear of redemption there is held in the mind, you know, and we forget our own forgetting, and we forget how much resistance was in our mind or is still active in our mind.
You know what really blows me away is when you read the Course and then you read some other spiritual stuff that really makes the world real and think that we're here to like make the world a better place. And the resistance to the idea that there is no world, and that's what we're coming to find out, is really amazing. I mean, spiritual people want this place to be a real place and want to use it as a goal for their spiritual teachings of somebody else other than themselves. And when you read these lessons, you know, if you've been a spiritual teacher, you realize these thoughts do not mean anything, including this one. Like none of my thoughts mean anything, including this one. Like your mind just goes, blah.
Yes, my experience with this is that I had to come back to lessons and say, did Jesus really say that? I so want him not to have said that. Oh, he really, really did say that. This world is not real. Okay. All right. Penelope, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to thank you because, yeah, I had the same struggles, and then, and I have read the introduction, but not enough, even though I think it's Leeson Toley says you should read it every day to remind yourself, you know, before you do the lesson. As I get tripped up on thinking, this lesson isn't working. What other forgiveness method can I use? And then I buy into it and I try and find another thing to use. So yeah, so you've just really shone the light on the ego thoughts. The same thoughts are going through my mind. So yeah, so just really grateful to you, Nikki, for your dedication and your belief in what Jesus is saying in the Course. Like, you know, like you're saying.
That's not that, don't mislead yourself. I didn't believe any of it, but I liked it.
But
he told me I didn't have to believe it. So I said, thank you, God, and went ahead.
But what I'm talking about is not your necessarily your belief in the lessons, but your belief in, you would read like the introduction or read stuff in the text and, okay, so you would grab a hold of that. That's what I'm talking about. So that's really given me encouragement to trust in that and to believe in that, even if I can't grasp what the lesson's saying or I don't agree with the lesson, I can agree with what Jesus says, is just apply it and know that it's going to work. So that's the belief I'm talking about. So yeah, so I find that very encouraging and very helpful.
See, I didn't know any of this. I just did what I was told to do without knowing any of this. This is everything I'm telling you is hindsight. I
Right.
didn't know that the application of the daily lesson would release me from my upsets. I didn't know how that was work. I didn't even think about that. This is all hindsight. And I don't know about blind trust or faith. I didn't have trust and faith. I still don't have a lot of trust and faith. It was that, you know, when you're in the black hole of despair and there's someone's handing you a life buoy, you grab onto it like grim death. You just do it. And the fact that the introduction told me that I don't have to understand, I don't have to believe, none of this matters, I can just apply it. I thought, oh, thank God, because that's all I had. I was attracted to the course. Now, whether that's based on previous lifetimes, I suspect it is, but I was attracted to it. The way some people pick it up and then throw it across the room, I was attracted to it. I can't tell you the why or wherefore of that, but I wanted to do it, so I did it. And you know, it's not really about dedication or any of that stuff. It's just the way the story unfolds.
Yeah.
But don't underestimate the resistance to doing the daily lessons, or the resistance to reading the instructions. And I've had to go back and read the instructions to part 2 several times. And you get to the reviews, and then you have to reread the instructions to the reviews again and again, because the mind forgets them or misinterprets them, or you find, you think, how many times am I supposed to be doing this? Oh, I have to go back and read the instructions again. So I've done a lot of going back and rereading the instructions so that I do it right.
Thanks, Nikki. Anyone else wanted to comment? Or we'll just do our 10-minute meditation. No? Okay. So if you want to stay for a 10-minute meditation, stay. If you want to leave, you're free to leave. You can just say goodbye now if you want to go, or we'll just start the 10 minutes. Okay.